about it right now. Everything's okay. No matter where you find yourself, no matter what kind of stuff is going on.
Did I, in fact, just wake up? Yes, I did. Ooh, look at that shoulder. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Isis and this is, oh my gosh, my hair looks so nuts. This is Isis and this is Isis Says Hi. I'm filming this a little bit later than I intended, but I have just been kind of really tired. I was like, I still wanted to film. This video is pretty short and it's just gonna be talking about Aunt Polly Jackson because it's still Black History Month. I couldn't find a whole bunch and this one, it's a little sad. I still thought it was a story to tell. I wanted to do Black History Month differently and then I wanted it to be a little bit more or as positive as possible, but I know that that's just a pretty difficult thing to do. I'm gonna talk about Miss Aunt Polly Jackson. I don't know if I introduced myself. My name is Isis and this is Isis Says Hi. I make a lot of research videos about topics that I'm interested in or that matter to me, or in this case people, and sometimes I vlog. So if you like any of those things, feel free to subscribe and I hope you enjoy this video. Who is Aunt Polly Jackson? Aunt Polly Jackson is a woman who is famously known for fighting off slave catchers with a butcher knife and a hot kettle. She was once enslaved, but managed to escape after she could no longer take being a slave. Through the Underground Railroad, she escaped and ended up in the Northern Settlement in a place near Ripley, Ohio, and that's mostly now known as Africa. It was called Africa because it was made up of a lot of escaped slaves. They had been offered land to settle there, and there was like a whole story behind that space, and I left a link down below that kind of explains it. That settlement was along the Underground Railroad, and folks would either stay there or continue up north after resting. Aunt Polly was offered land and she settled in Africa, and she started a small farm to support herself. She dedicated the rest of her life to helping others win their freedom by opening up her home and feeding them. Due to the Underground Railroad, the loss of slaves and labor on plantations owned by white slave owners began to have a toll on their production and income. And it did not take long until they came up with the reverse Underground Railroad system, gotta love originality, where escaped slaves were recaptured and brought back to their plantations or sold to new owners. If that happens, they might as well be signing a death sentence. You're either gonna get beaten or killed in some way, shape, or form, or mutilated, honestly, or sold to new owners where Lord knows what they're gonna do if they know that you escaped. The reverse Underground Railroad system became successful. Many anti-abolitionists, so people who didn't believe in abolishing or ending slavery, disguised themselves as abolitionists, people who did believe in abolishing or ending slavery. Many of the recaptured slaves were trapped in houses, attacked and injured to prevent them from moving. A few were killed for resisting. That same thing of signing a death sentence, because if you are kind of attacked or injured in a way to prevent you from moving, when you get back to the plantation or when you go to a new plantation, they're probably going to make it even worse for you because you aren't going to be of like a physically, you're not going to be worth anything to them, which the logic for this is pretty dumb. Slavery is dumb in and of itself, regardless of the good economic like things that it gives people, and even that it's only a specific set of people, because again, slaves were expensive, so it's not like even everybody could actually have slaves anyways. Outside of that, the logic of incapacitating them to the point that they can't leave or move at all, and then sending them to the plantation they escaped from or a new one, means that like when they get there, they're still gonna be incapable of doing much. Realizing that they were not being helped at all, Aunt Polly decided to take matters into her own hands. She dressed herself up as a weak older lady who could not be attacked. For the anti-abolitionists, older people were of no interest and were usually left alone. She carried a cloth that she wrapped around her shoulder to hide her butcher knife and a kettle of boiling water, and Aunt Polly managed to fight off several slave capturers. Many of her attacks were at night, smart, and she often poured hot water on the slave hunters when they could not be fought off with a single knife. After dealing with the anti-abolitionists, she hosted fugitives in her house and helped them with direction if they chose to continue their journey. Soon, the legend of Aunt Polly became widespread, and several similar attacks on white enslavers, or slave catchers, along the Underground Railway route began to happen. Attacks started to get more deadly, resulting in the death of many white slave hunters, but the tricks of Aunt Polly Jackson helped to suppress the reverse railroad system. So let's talk about the Underground Railroad for a little bit. For starters, the Underground Railroad was a huge network of people who helped slaves escape to the north and to Canada. It was made up of many individuals, many white but mostly black, who knew only of the local efforts to aid slaves to freedom and not the overall operation, which I think is also really smart. Still, it moved hundreds of slaves to freedom each year. According to one estimate, it moved about 100,000 between 1810 and 1850. This system to assist runaway slaves seems to have begun close to the end of the 18th century. In 1786, George Washington complained about how one of his runaway slaves was helped by a society of Quakers. The system grew, and around 1831 it was named the Underground Railroad, or the Underground Railway, and it was named after the early steam railroads. And so the system used terms that were used in railroading. Homes and businesses where fugitives would rest and eat were called stations, and depots were run by station masters. Those who contributed money or goods were stockholders, and the conductor was responsible for moving fugitives from one station to the next. For slaves, running away to the north was anything but easy. So the first thing was needing to be able to escape from the slaveholder, and this meant relying on their own resources if they even had it. And sometimes a conductor who was posing as a slave would enter the plantation and then guide the runaways northward. The runaway slaves would have to move at night, and they would generally travel between 10 and 20 miles to the next station, where they would rest and eat, hiding in barns and any other hidden or out-of-the-way places. And while they waited, a message would be sent to the next station to alert its station master. They would also travel by train and boat, and those transports sometimes had to be paid for. And so money was a really important part of slaves being able to escape. They also needed it to buy clothes so that they wouldn't stand out, wouldn't attract any kind of suspicious people. It's for their literal safety. Because of course, slaves were probably getting paid nothing. Money was usually donated to them and was raised by various groups, and that includes something called the vigilance committees. So vigilance committees rose in larger towns and cities in the north, and it was mostly in New York, Philadelphia, and Boston. And in addition to getting money, the organizations made sure to give food, housing, money, and help the fugitives settle into a community by helping them find jobs and giving them letters of recommendation if they need it. And so the Underground Railroad had a lot of famous participants. John Fairfield, who is the son of a slaveholding family who made a lot of rescues. I found that really funny and ironic. Levi Coffin, a Quaker who helped more than 3,000 slaves. Harriet Tubman, who made 19 trips into the South and led over 300 slaves to freedom. Everybody knows Harriet Tubman, and I'm happy she's the one that I know the most out of these two people. So yeah, that's kind of it. So yeah, I told you it was gonna be short. It's kind of cool to learn a bit about Aunt Polly Jackson. I saw it while I was Googling. So a big shout out to, there's like a Twitter that talks about some unknown folks in history that we just might not have seen all the time. And then I have my sources down below. Again, there wasn't a whole bunch on her, but I was able to gather a couple things. And then I also left the video that talks a little bit more about Africa, Ohio. And yeah, I'll see you next week, I think, for the last installment, at least for Black History Month. And hopefully, it seems like I'm getting through the Biden stuff. So hopefully that should be done by the end of the week next week. It's fun. It's really fun. But it says I'm like halfway through the document. So yeah, and I'm also going to be splitting that up into different topics because I realize that I can't do it all in one go. I would cry. So thank you for watching. I'll see you next week, and happy Black History Month.